Japan Station is made possible in part by Patreon support. If you would like to make sure that I can keep bringing you more content like this, then head on over to japankyo.com/Patreon and sign up for as little as $1 a month.
まもなく3番線に電車が参ります。危ないですから黄色い線までお下がりください。
Welcome to Japan Station. I'm Tony Vega. Okay, so this is kind of a surprise episode, just as much as it is for me as it is for you, in a way. And that's because, well, I was not expecting to release an episode so soon after episode 46 with Reina, the voice actor. Really good episode, by the way. Check it out at japanstationpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcast. But anyway, so less than a week ago, I messaged James from the Inside Japan podcast. And James has been podcasting since I at least like 2015 or 2014. Inside Japan podcast used to be called ALT Insider Podcast, if I remember correctly, because he runs altinsider.com as well. So, by the way, ALT, for anyone that is unaware, is short for Assistant Language Teacher. And that is the term generally used to describe the native English speakers that are working with Japanese English teachers in Japanese public schools. Now, there's, variations and all that, but generally speaking, you have a native English speaker that works with the Japanese national teacher there that teaches English, and so they work together to teach the kids English. So basically, ALT just means kind of English teacher in the loosest kind of sense of the word. Anyway, I'm going all over the place here, but I have experience working as an ALT, as an English teacher in Japan. I was part of the JET program from 2010 to 2013. And James, what he does on his show, on the Inside Japan podcast, is focus on work-related things in Japan. For example, advice for people looking to work in Japan, or if you want to learn about career opportunities in Japan, or if you just want to learn about the interesting people that have ended up working in Japan and what they've done after they've left Japan. There's just so much content over there. You definitely should check out Inside Japan podcast. So, be that James is my senpai in this world of Japan podcasting, I decided to reach out and say, hey, James, you want to do a collab? I can interview you for my podcast, and then you can interview me for your podcast. And that's exactly what ended up happening. So you're going to get to hear me interview James first, and then you're going to get to hear James interview me about my career path and some of my failures and how I ended up in Hawaii and all that kind of stuff. So actually, we recorded these the other way around. So first he interviewed me, and then I interviewed him. But I'm going to flip them around because I want you to learn a little bit about James in case you're not aware who he is. And then you'll learn a bit more about me. So enough about me. Let's get to it. Here is my conversation with James from the Inside Japan podcast and altinsider.com.
The next stop is Japan Station. The doors on the right side will open.
So let me start with then a just really basic question. So you must get this sort of thing a lot, or you have gotten it many, many times, I'm sure. I want to go to Japan, James. What should I do?
Yeah, okay. So that's the question. Sure.
Yeah.
Well, the first question I like to do is, I thought there'd be more kind of caveats, but yeah. So the first thing I always say is really ask yourself why you want to go, right? So if you just want to go for fun, 3 months, go ahead, go crazy, right? Mm-hmm. If you want to go for longer term, really ask yourself what your end goal is. Don't just go blindly like, I like Nintendo, so I want to go to Japan. That's a fine way to start the flame, but there's got to be, more to it. You got to decide your goal a little bit more than just go to Japan, right? I think that's really important. That some people, I wish I did that, and I kind of try to tell people that is going to Japan just for fun is awesome, right? But hopefully you could have a little bit more of a end point, right? So maybe it might be for you, hey, I want to go to Mount Fuji and climb Mount Fuji. That's awesome, right? Go to Japan, go for Japan for a year, teach English, climb Mount Fuji, come home, awesome, right? But if you might just be, I want to be this, which is translator or IT dude in Japan, that makes it for more, I think, a more rewarding experience. Something you always have that goal in your mind that you're searching towards. But if you want simply the best way to go, JET program is the best way to go to Japan if you don't speak Japanese, for sure.
Do you think it's gotten more difficult to, for example, get on JET program or any kind of English teaching job in general in the past, I don't know, like 10 years?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's two parts to that, right? JET is always the hottest and the hardest to get on. I think that hasn't changed at all because it is the best pay. That hasn't changed. As the teaching conditions and the compensation different changes have gone down and down, I think it's gotten easier to get jobs in Japan outside of JET, right? So it's easier to find now. I mean, now it's a special case, right? Corona's going on, and people that are already in Japan, they are easy to get jobs right now, easier than ever. Right. But let's say Corona's not happening. I still think it's easier than it once was. And as you can tell, because now they do hire people from non-native speaking English countries like they never did before. That became a thing like 3 or 4 years ago. So, I'm not digging too deep into that, but I don't think they would have made that change unless they had to.
Yeah. So, all right. So right now is a good time for those in Japan to move on up, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Maybe looking into university jobs and that kind of thing.
Well, hold on. I should say a caveat. I mean, if you don't have a job, finding your first job is easy. Getting to the next step, that is harder than ever. That is definitely harder than ever. Yeah, so university jobs are there's less of them than ever, and now they're requiring more requirements than ever. So when I first got to Japan, I would interview university teachers, and they say, well, I started my master's, didn't finish it, but they still got an awesome job at university. Now it is, unless you have a master's, you can't even, you shouldn't even apply. You can apply, but it's just worthless. So that has definitely changed. University jobs are now, there's less of them, and they require, more qualifications than they ever did before. It's still a good job if you get it, but also a lot more of them are becoming part-time, right? So there's part-time university positions, and they're not as hot as those full-time cushy ones that, you get the year-long contract and the health benefits and everything like that.
Would you say that's a result of like the less students versus more people with higher qualifications?
Yeah, I think it's just like a result of more and more people just coming into Japan to live. More foreigners being in Japan in general, I think. I mean, there's probably some more market factors, causing that for sure. And let's not forget, there is less and less students, like you said. I mean, college attendance is going down precipitously in Japan, so that's also a big problem. So if I'm 18 and my end goal, and I'm starting college right now in America, and I'm saying I want to be a university teacher in Japan, I don't know. Is that a good long-term goal to have anymore? I don't know.
Okay. Well, what about like so like I told you, earlier that, I had one school where I was kind of frustrated and just not all that happy at that school. Do you have any tips for anybody in that sort of situation? Like, is there anything you can tell them to maybe improve the situation? How would you approach someone that comes to you and describes like, hey, I'm not happy at my school. Like, what do I do?
Yeah. So there's two kind of things the decision to make first is it worth it? And because sometimes it really is not worth it. Like sometimes you have, no matter what you do, you've already tried to do a few things and the teacher just is not receptive. I don't think sometimes it's worth fighting through that. I think it's doing what you got to do, clocking in and clocking out. I think that's fine. If the teachers aren't receptive to you, then you get fighting too far is our job is to be an assistant language teacher, assuming you're talking about being an ALT or JET, right?
Right.
Once you've put yourself out there, hey, I want to do this, and they keep saying no. If you keep pushing it, now you're not doing your job anymore. You're not assisting, you're being annoying, right? So at some point you have to recognize that, hey, I can't save this school. I'm doing what they want me to do, and that's it. If they don't tell me to do anything, I don't do anything. But there are some schools where the teacher just never had the experience of a ALT or JET that wants to do stuff. That's happens all the time. Oh, I didn't know you wanted to do stuff. I had a teacher where I was like, oh, I got this game for this grammar point. It really works well. Like, oh, you have some games? Like, they never heard of that. I was like, oh, yeah, I can do stuff. And so the main thing is you have to make a connection with the teacher in some way. So how do you do that? Sometimes teachers are very like, they don't want to talk to the LT. It seems like they never talk to you outside of the classroom. So you got to just test the waters a little bit and say, hey, what are we doing today? Start with that simple question in the morning. What are we doing today? They'll tell you. And, you got to take a little people skills, read the room a little bit. They might go in depth, or they might say, hey, we're doing this page.
Right.
No matter what they say, that you can have, okay, well, I have this idea, or I'll come up with something for this class. And then, again, see how they react. They might say, oh, I already got this whole class planned. And then you say, okay, well, I'd like to do it in the future if you want to let me know. Always just offering, right? That's the main thing. Offering things to do, and if they take it, they take it. If they don't, they don't, right? It's not up to you if they ever choose to do what you say, but you just the main thing is showing that you want to do stuff. And if they see that, some teachers will change their ways and say, okay, well, Tony here wants to do stuff, so I'm going to make sure that I'm going to, hey, we're doing a class here, there's an extra 10 minutes, do you want to do something? That's cool. It's all about making yourself available and showing that you want to do something, because don't assume your teacher knows you want to do something, because there are plenty of jets and ALTs that come to Japan and don't want to do anything. So you got to show you're not one of those people.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Like, you have to make it clear that, like, hey, I am here for you. You just got to tell me.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, after you finished your stint as an ALT, did you immediately go into translation, or how did that transition happen?
I started before, like, I started a little bit, like, let's say 2 years of translation on the side, kind of while I was an ALT. And then it was just, I was so lucky. Like, I just got this one company that was freelance, but they kept using me, and they kind of like said, like, well, we're just going to use you alone. And they they couldn't hire me full time for reasons, but it was still enough money. So like, okay, so this is pretty much cool. I was pretty much set. So I said, all right, you know what? That's it. So I cut the ALT cord then, and I've been still at the same company ever since then. I was like, I don't know, 8 years ago or something now. So I just got really lucky. And it's really, really harder now than ever to be a translator as well, just because there's so many people trying to do it. Like, it's like I try to be positive about everything, working in Japan and stuff. It's just now compared to when I came, and I've been here 10 years now. There's way more people trying to do the same thing as you, no matter what it is. So you just got to keep that in mind, right? And you got to work a little harder to make yourself different and make yourself more hireable in some way. You just got to work harder than people, sadly, that came here 10 years before you. I mean, if you're coming now, it's like, that's just the way of the world, I guess. There's way more people now that are in Japan for whatever reason. They want to do what you want to do.
Yeah. Now, I know, of course, you ended up getting married and all that stuff, but were you thinking, like, originally was the plan to do JET and then go back to the U.S. and do some other kind of job? Like, what was the thinking long-term originally?
So my long-term goal, I wrote it on my wall, because I always, I wanted to be that kind of person, always working towards a goal. So I wanted to pass N1 and become a video game translator. That was my goal. I was like, all right, what? I'm not going to be this kind of teaching forever, dude. I'm just going to do it, So I really studied Japanese, like, insane. Like, I told you I partied a little bit when I got to Japan. I spent a little bit too much just having fun. But after that, I had that switch in my mind saying, you know what? I'm going to just study. And that's all I did. I didn't go out. I was just studying. I was doing, like SRS and stuff to study Japanese and stuff. I would add weekends. I was adding 400, 500 cards. Easy. I'm talking about 8 hours a day. That wasn't a problem. Get home from school, from teaching, 4 hours of study. It was nothing. So that got me over a 2 year period or so. That got me to like N2. Got to N1 level, passed it. I did not pass it. I failed that one. I was kind of like, okay, you know what? I'll take it next year. And it was going to be no big deal. Then I met my wife, and, I always said I would not meet a Japanese person that spoke English. I was not going to do it. I'm not going to fall down that trap, because, you see it always, but then I did. She spoke English and stuff, and it was just kind of studying, got a little less of my requirements. It's tough to, when you have a significant other, you can't say like, well, Saturday I'm studying Japanese for 12 hours. What are you doing? It's not like that, guys. It's not going to work. And my studying got less and less. And so that, and also I should have stated earlier, I did get some video game translation kind of stuff, but I just learned it was the hardest kind of translation in the world. Like, you have to be creative when you do it, and that was just, and you get paid the same, by the way, for business and video game translation, at least is my experience. And it's just way harder and takes about triple or 4 times as much time, because you got to think about, what is this character trying to say? But if I get a business document that says the meeting starts at 8, I got to say the business meeting starts at 8. That's it. There's no, like, I don't care about the tone or anything. The meeting starts at 8. So for me, it was just it turned out to be like you know what, maybe that's not the smartest thing. I can do this business document in half an hour, or I could translate this video game paragraph that'll take me a weekend, right? So I kind of made the change there. It's trying to change goals there. And unfortunately, I remember I got a translation job at this point, so I was translating, and that kind of, I lost the fire I had to learn Japanese at that point. I know it's got, some people are surprised by that, but really, once I was doing and getting money for what I wanted to do, I lost the fire to get that N1. I was like, you know, what? I mean, I got the goal kind of, you know, I don't have the gold medal, but I'm getting the pay as if I got a gold medal. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
so I was kind of like, and I do, you know, as you know, I'm leaving Japan in a month or so, and I'm gonna have an episode on my show about this too. But that is my biggest regret moment, is that I was so close to the goal. I got N2, and I just barely didn't pass N1. And you know, if I tried again, I would have got it. I know everyone can say that, but I really think I would have. But I kind of let it slip because I had a job and stuff. I was like, you know what? Who needs it? But that's my biggest regret, is I don't have that kind of. I set that as my main goal, and I never got there. But you know, I guess it's still. Being able to work to be a translator for money is still fine. You know, it's not a bad goal to have, but I still miss that. I still wish I had the gold medal. That's for sure.
Sure. It's always nice to have. Yeah. And I did listen to the episode of your podcast where you have your wife on. That was, I think, earlier this year.
Yeah.
That was a good one. All right. So then after you, so you're going to be going back to the US. Is that, you're still thinking you're going to be doing translation? Is that thanks to the magic of the internet, you're still able to do that? Is that how that goes?
Yep. The company, the company has a branch in America, so they're just going to keep paying me the same way. I'm just doing the same exact thing. So I really understand. I'm very lucky that I found this company that can do this. I wish, you know, I wish I could say anything else, but just I got lucky. That's all I can say. It's not about magic, or I worked harder than everyone else. I did not. I just got lucky and found this company that everything worked out perfectly. So I could do the same job in America, and it's going to continue on as it is.
Yeah. Well, but you were also studying Japanese really hard. So when
That's
the opportunity
true,
came, right? Like you
Yeah.
were able to take advantage of the opportunity, right?
That's
So-
true. That's true. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
make your own luck. Blah blah blah. What are those inspirational quotes say?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Something. Yeah. All right. So last question here, and it's kind of a random one, but I
Okay.
did see that you do some speedrun commentating. That was very interesting. So how did that come about? I mean, I know you've talked about video games often, you know, in the podcast it's come up. I know you enjoy that, but how did that come about?
Yeah. So really, just speedrunning is trying to beat a game as fast as possible. I found that on Twitch maybe 9 years ago when it's just starting out. I was like, wow, this is this cool thing. I've never heard of this. What is that? I got really into that world, and the GDQ marathons that they do twice a year to raise money, and people are beating games as fast as they can. I really got into that world pretty hardcore. It's just really cool, I thought. Like, I never did it myself. I didn't have enough. Again, I was studying. I didn't have time to play video games, but I could always like have the music on the background, you know, while you're studying. That was fine. And I really got into competitive speedrunning, which people doing, you know, racing, let's say Super Mario Brothers. Who can beat it the fastest? They start at the same time. Whoever beats it first wins. And somehow I just said, like, that's something I'm really interested in. I already started my website, you know, and I know I can do a podcast pretty well. So I started a speedrunning podcast about that, talked to some people. And then there was one guy interviewed that was starting a kind of a company about speedrunning, and they had some events. They said, well, why don't you try to commentate some? And I did that, and I had a lot of fun. It mixes, like, it's mixing sport. I like sports, and mixing sports and video games together. It's really fun. And it's been a lot of fun. It's a cool little side fun thing that unfortunately I haven't been able to do so much because all the moving preparations. But it's just a cool little hobby to do. And if anyone wants to get into it, they always need commentators. It's definitely a fun thing to do, just to let you appreciate video games in a new way. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I saw your link in the ALT Insider Twitter profile, and then, but are you still doing the speedrunning podcast? Is that still active?
Yeah, no, it's not really. That's not as updated, because I started doing the commentating like weekly kind of thing. So I was like, well, you know what, that's going to take my time. I can only do so much, as you know. You know, you got to kind of pick and choose what you do. And I was having more fun commentating. So the podcast is now kind of an archived podcast at the moment. But
definitely,
commentating is still going strong.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, one thing that I really respect about you're always putting one out every episode, once a week. It's always coming out. And I told you, you know, I've been listening for a while, and it's always there for me. So I know that takes time to prep and to find the guests alone, just to figure out who you're going to talk to.
Yeah, that's what I was so happy when you said, I love when people say like, sorry to bother you. It's like, all right, you never bother me. Just tell me you want to be on the show, and I rarely say no to someone. I've said no to someone twice I've got probably 150 people saying they want to get on the show. I've probably said no twice, because like for some reason, like I was in jail because I did this. Like, all right, we can't do that. I can't talk about that.
A little too much,
like, yeah. So some people want to be too negative. I want to talk about my horrible experience on jet. It's like, oh, what, and then they tell me this story. It's like, that's kind of your fault. It's like that kind of thing. There's a lot of people like that want to find a place to complain. So always say no to them. But most of the time, I'd luck to anyone that's been to Japan because there's always something. I think everyone has something interesting that to share with other people. Everyone has a different path to Japan, so you can learn something from everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's just so many interesting people that you've talked to. So, of course, Inside Japan is the podcast. Very easy to find, but also altinsider.com. You can find all that stuff there as well. James, thank you so much for chatting. Thank you so much for interviewing me.
Yep. No, thank you. Thanks for finding me and dealing with my scheduling problems and everything. It's been a crazy month, and it's going to be crazier now for the next month. Well, awesome. It was awesome to talk to you. I hope we talk again in the future for sure.
Awesome. Yes. All right. See ya.
Tony, so you're doing some cool things in Japan. You are the runner and manager and everything of Japan Station Podcast. How's that going?
Oh, it's going great. It's been fun. Yeah, I'm doing Japan Station and a couple other podcasts too, all through japankyo.com.
Okay, so just a little hint here. I'll be on that podcast as well in the future, so stay tuned for that.
Yep.
Maybe at the same time this one comes out.
Yep.
But Tony, let's learn a little bit about you. We got to get people excited about hearing you on the show here. So tell us a little bit about you and what you're all about.
Sure. So, let's see. I mean, aside from the podcast and the website, I currently work as the editor-in-chief of a magazine published in Hawaii. It's called Wasabi Magazine. And I mean, I think you can guess by the name. Yeah, that does have something to do with Japan. We cover some Hawaii and Japan-related stuff. But I was in Japan from 2010 to 2013 on the JET program in Kobe. And before then, I was also in Osaka studying abroad. And I've been going back and forth ever since, at least once a year, usually. And currently, I'm living in Hawaii, as I mentioned.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what was kind of your hook into Japan then? I mean, what was kind of the thing that got you kind of interested in the Japan world? Just living in Hawaii or what?
No. So I was born in New York. And I think from an early age, I was just kind of exposed to Asian culture in general. But I mean, video games, of course, there was that. There was some Nintendo, some Sega and all that early on. But at the age of 10, I moved to Peru for a couple of years because my family is originally from Peru. And there I got even more kind of exposed to Japanese culture and anime. They were showing anime there on just normal TV before anime blew up in the US. So I watched things like Captain Tsubasa, Saint Seiya, Dragon Ball, stuff like that, and kept playing video games. I had cousins that are kind of like half Japanese. And so I was kind of exposed to all this stuff without fully understanding like Japan or really much, where exactly Japan is and all this kind of stuff. But then I moved to Florida, and in high school, I had the chance to study Japanese. And so I did. And in university, I just kept going with it, in graduate school and all that stuff.
Okay. So then I want to know what you get. You graduate, university, and now you want to do something with Japan. What steps did you take at that point to kind of, do something related to Japan?
So in 2007 to 2008, I had studied abroad for a year in Osaka, and I knew I wanted to go back somehow. And so I started looking at options, teaching, of course, but also graduate school. I did apply to a graduate school program in Kyoto, and that didn't end up working out. I think I ended up spending like maybe $200 or something on the application, so I never got that back.
Jesus, I know, it's such a ripoff. It's so horrible.
Yeah. And then I had to have like a friend's friend go to the actual university to look at the posting, like the physical posting. So anyway, so that didn't work out, and I after I graduated from university in Florida, it was like in December, so it was still kind of, that's not a good season to start applying to stuff. So I had kind of I was kind of in limbo. So I decided to go to Japan for like 3 months to just try to get a job on tourist visa. Let's see if I can do something. And I stayed at a friend's house, and I applied to tons of stuff, like 99% teaching. Yeah, that didn't work out.
Oh, okay. So wait, that was 2008-ish or so?
Yeah, that was around.
Okay, so that's like,
yeah.
I mean, that's back in the day, like
Yeah.
when I first got to Japan, that was like very common. People would just come to Japan,
Yeah.
whatever, just apply to everything, and they usually could get something. So you did not get anything during that little 3-month
Did
stint
not,
there.
did not. Thankfully, I had a place to stay, so that didn't cost me money. So it was a nice 3 months in Japan, but anyway, so I went back to Florida. I already understood that there was a relatively low chance that this would work out. I was already thinking about Jet, maybe Interac, so I applied to both Jet and Interac, and I end up getting Jet, but I also get an offer to an interview with Interac, and I was gonna go to the interview, and I decided to go do it in Chicago, even though there was probably a closer one, just because I had never been to Chicago, and I thought I'd get a trip out of it. So, I know it was on my money, but still I get to visit Chicago.
Yeah.
So me and a friend end up going to Chicago, but I decided to just not do the interview. I called him ahead of time and told him, nah, you know what, I'm okay. I have another option. And thankfully, Jet ended up working out.
Hold on. Whoa,
Yes,
whoa. A lot of
yes,
people are
yes.
flipping out right now.
Yes,
A lot
yes.
of people are really.
Yes, I know.
You
I
had
know.
the gold in the hand of the
Yes.
Jet interview, which is something people spend a lot of time, a lot of work to get. And you called him up and said,
so I
no
called,
thanks.
No, I
Wow.
called Interac to tell them no, but I went
Oh, okay,
forward
okay,
with
okay.
Jet. I went forward with Jet.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I was messed
Yeah.
up. Excuse
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
I
yeah.
thought it was the other way.
Because
okay. So that makes more sense.
Yeah. I wanted Jet. Interac was my backup, and I was cocky, say whatever you want, but I thought, you know what? I'm just gonna put all my chips on Jet. And
Yeah,
thankfully, it did end up working out. And in 2010, I ended up going to Kobe.
Okay, cool. So now
Mm-hmm.
you got the Jet dream was alive with Tony here, and you got in there.
Yeah.
And so then you go to Japan. You're on Jet. How was your Jet experience? Put it succinctly, of course.
Let's see. There was good and bad. It just depends on which school you're talking about. I had some absolutely wonderful experiences at some, and at one particular school, it was really there were many times when it was quite frustrating. So it just depends on the teacher and the school. But I am glad that I went. But I mean, we can get into it in more detail if you want.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get clickbait here. This is the internet. Talk about what was bad about your experience at that school.
Okay, so I worked at 3 schools.
Yeah.
And my base school was a junior high. And then I worked once a week at an elementary school, and I worked 2 times a week at a school for the blind. And the one that wasn't good was the junior high. And I think like what I'm going to say really is nothing new to many people that have been in this sort of situation. But, there was a lot of like free time that I did end up using to study Japanese and try to keep myself busy. But it was frustrating in the sense that, I'm there. I did want to do a good job. I did want to contribute. I did want to feel like a part of the team. And many times that just didn't seem to be meshing with the priorities of many of the teachers there. And there was a lot of students. I wanted to spend more time with them, help them out more. But it was always awkward. There were always like teachers that, for example, there was one that was my the person in charge of the ALTs, because there were 2 ALTs most of the time at that school, and she would be like, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, there's a party tonight. Oh, I forgot to tell you, like there's a big ceremony. It was this morning." Like, and they go like, "Oh, you could have told me this like yesterday." Like, so it really felt like I was an afterthought in some ways at that school. I did have some nice moments, but overall, like that was not the school that made me stay 3 years, right?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Not that bad. That's a kind of common thing. That's not the worst story
Definitely.
by far. But yeah, it definitely happened before. That he's kind of like, oh yeah, we forgot about Tony.
Yeah,
Crap. Who's gonna tell him?
definitely, yeah.
And there's a party tonight, and it's 4,000 yen.
Yes,
Do you want to
yes.
come?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Oh, I wasn't planning to spend that much tonight, but okay, I guess I have to.
Yeah, that definitely happens. Okay,
Yeah,
so your
yeah.
3 years of Jet is up. You did 3. At that time, it was full 3 years, right? You couldn't do 5 yet, right?
No, there was the option to extend, but it wasn't a guarantee. But
Okay.
I wasn't thinking that I would do 5 years ever. I was probably thinking 2 or 3, and because of a couple of the other schools, the School for the Blind and the elementary school, I thought I'd stay, and I ended up doing the third year.
Okay. So then now you come to the crossroads of a lifetime. Jet
Yeah.
is over. You decide to cut the cord of this nice and gentle, soft pillow of Jet, and then
Yeah.
what do you do?
Okay, so here's I've got an interesting story here that I've never told anybody this story, at least in public, but so I started looking for jobs in Japan because I do love being in Japan, and I wasn't necessarily like, I was fine with going back to the US, but I was also totally fine with staying in Japan given the proper circumstances. So, I go to like Hello Work, and I start looking around, like jobs online and all that. And really, I wasn't finding anything that was exciting me. I wasn't thinking that I wanted to continue teaching English at that point. I wanted to try something else. And so eventually I decided that I'm going to go to the US to do graduate school. And eventually I end up doing Japanese language and linguistics at the University of Hawaii. But before all that was clear in my head, I started looking also at jobs in Miami, Florida, where I was going back to. And I heard about, I don't know, maybe it must have been an email that somebody sent me. The Japanese consulate in Miami was looking for a full-time employee. I believe they were going to be doing mainly visa type stuff. And this was around the end of my third year on JET. So it must have been around April or May. And I apply. And they want me to go for an interview physically.
Okay.
So I'm in Kobe, and they tell me like, we like your resume. We'd like to have you over if you can make it. Okay. So I did have some days off that I could take. So I must have taken like about a week off. I go back to Miami. I do the interview, and it's like 3 Japanese people across from me, and the interview is like completely in Japanese because you have to be bilingual to do the job because you're dealing with Japanese and English speakers. It was like, it kind of had the vibe of a JET interview almost, how there's multiple people talking to you. And I think there was one guy, the American guy, that was a former JET there as well. And so it must have been like 15 or 20 minutes. We talk, it was fine. And then, I have a time afterwards to get a description of the job with the American guy. He kind of runs through it. And so I go home and I wait, and within a few days I get a call back, and they told me like, oh, well, we decided to go with someone else because they thought you were overqualified. And so
Wow.
yeah, I mean, the idea was, it seems, that they wanted somebody that they didn't have to worry about quitting in the near future. And to be perfectly honest, I wasn't thinking that I would be there more than a year. So, hey, whatever, it worked out for them. I guess it worked out for me. But it was rather strange to say like, oh, you're too good for this job. I was like, oh, okay, I guess you could have told me that before I spent the money to come back to Florida and then go back to Japan and then, run out the rest of my contract too. Then later go back to Florida.
I know. Wow, that's a lot of chunk of change there, just thrown down the drain. But
It was. And it's an interesting experience. But anyway, I guess the interview experience was good experience too.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Okay, so what's next though?
So I applying for graduate school. It has very strict schedule, and I hadn't begun the year before because things were not clear for me. I hadn't decided exactly what I wanted to do yet. So I had to wait another year to get into the fall semester of the graduate school that I was hoping to get into, again, University of Hawaii. So I went back to working as before I went to Japan on JET, I was teaching Japanese after school it was like a karate dojo that they had an after school program, and part of it was teaching Japanese to the kids. So I went back to that job. I was doing that part-time as I was applying for scholarships and the graduate school. And thankfully, maybe I was putting all my chips on one thing again, but I went for the University of Hawaii. I did get in. And so then about 1 year after I had come back from Japan, I moved to Hawaii from Florida.
Wow. Okay. So 2 questions here. So you were teaching Japanese in America then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty. I mean, what's your qualifications to get that kind of job? I don't even know the job. What's the job field like? What's the requirements to get that job? And is there any kind of JLPT you got to get? What's the deal there?
Well, okay. So the good thing about South Florida is that there aren't that many Japanese speakers to be competing with in the first place. So that's something in your favor if you speak Japanese at a high level and there's that sort of vacancy. But the other thing is I was recommended by my Japanese teacher. She sent me the email. She said you'd be good for this, and so then the owner of the dojo heard from her, and so I didn't have a JLPT anything. I actually don't have that. I only have it's like an oral proficiency thing. That's a different organization that I did. And anyway, but I've studied Japanese for over 20 years. I was very proficient at that point in time, and my Japanese teacher vouched for me, and so like it all ended up working out. But I didn't have any like certificate or anything like that.
Okay, just like if you can show you can do it and get the referral, obviously it's easier to get. But I guess your mileage may vary where you are in Japan, in America, right?
Definitely, yeah. Like if you're here in Hawaii, for example, there are many, many, many native Japanese speakers, so it's much tougher to compete in that sort of situation for that kind of job.
Sense.
Yeah.
Like a truly bad interviewer. I want to make sure I don't gloss over the point you said. You did Jet in School for the Blind. So I mean, I think that's an interesting point to go into a little bit too. So what's that like, and how do you go about lessons in a School for the Blind?
Okay, so when I arrived in Japan for JET, I was assigned to the junior high that I mentioned earlier and an elementary school. But around the midpoint of the first year, they ask you, what do you want to do the following school year? Do you want us to move you to a different school? Do you want to stay in the school? And you put in your request, and then they decide. So when it came time for me to say what I wanted to do, I ended up requesting to be put at the School for the Blind because I had heard from the person that had been working there before about it, and I'm legally blind, and so it just there was something about it. Like I was not born blind. I never went to a School for the Blind. This is something that happened right around the time that I graduated high school. So at the time, I didn't have much of a connection to any sort of visually impaired community. And it took me a while to kind of come to terms with my own kind of abilities and the new ways I had to do things in order to get things done. And I kind of saw it as an opportunity for me to grow as a person as well, but also to maybe do something that, I'm in a unique position. I'm this foreigner with a visual impairment. Maybe I can show these kids that have visual impairments as well that, hey, maybe you can do like what I'm doing now, and you don't have to just be limited to what you think you can do. And thankfully, they gave me the opportunity. And that school ended up being like the most wonderful school I've ever worked at. And it's really the number one reason why I stayed a third year, because for one, the classes are tiny. 1 to 3 students is usually what you get. And so, of course, you can do highly personalized classes and you can make adjustments. For example, there are some students that are totally blind. There are some students that can see more than I can. There are some students that can see less than I can, but are not totally blind. So you make adjustments and you design, certain games, whether it is using large text or it's very much like just purely verbal, or you work with the teacher to do Braille stuff. And aside from that, also, like, they were very like inclusive. They had me participate in like sports day, and they had me like, do you want to come do taiko with us? I would do taiko with them, do PE class with them, always inviting me to do things. And I was always just super happy to take part and interact with the kids. And by the time I left that school, like, there were multiple times that I was just like about to tear up and just, start bawling. But, it was just, for me as an individual, a person with a visual impairment, like, it was really motivating as well. But it was also just really rewarding from the standpoint as a teacher.
Yeah. That's what I mean. You kind of described the dream school that every Jet wants to have, right?
Yes.
One that you're included in everything and you get a chance to do a lot and you really connect with people.
Yeah.
Well, I should say it's teachers that want to be a teacher in Japan. There's a lot of teachers that don't
that
as well. But yeah, the ones that want to have, a meaningful time, that sounds like what you had. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I guess just in the class situation, I mean, I know there's different levels of blindness, and right, some people can't see anything, some people can see a little bit. So do you is there any kind of, do you do like more audio stuff, like more audio, like, you know, a dog sound or something to like teach dog words or something? I'm just guessing what you might do. I don't know. Is there any kind of interesting things you did to kind of get the vocab points across?
Well, really, it was a lot of verbal stuff. So, you know, I think that on the whole, the level of the teachers for English, at least, was quite a bit higher than a lot of the teachers in my other schools. There was one teacher. She was, I believe, totally blind, but she had studied either high school or university in the US, and she was like basically fluent. And the other two were also highly proficient. So on the whole, like I got the vibe that the level of the classes were just higher. We would always start the classes with singing in English, and they would be like pop songs, like the Mamas and the Papas, and just, you know, various songs that sometimes the teachers would pick out, and I would work with them. I would memorize them too. We would all sing, and we would talk about interesting things in the songs. We would have conversations about what we did in the day related to cultural things. So it was a lot more active in trying to get the kids to speak a lot more. You know, if I knew a kid loved puns, I would include a lot of puns in our like little riddle games, stuff like that. So, you know, when I could, I would make large print, you know, worksheets for them, for those kids that could use that. Otherwise, you know, it was a lot more, you know, verbal, just a lot of talking and questions and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's kind of stuff you can do when you have you're working as a real team, right? That's
Yeah.
another good point. You know, when you have a team of you work with a JT that wants to help you, and you can make cool stuff for each student, blah blah blah. But that's not the case everywhere, guys.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, and you got to you know, play with the hand you're dealt at whatever school you have out there.
Exactly.
But okay, so let's get back to your career path here. Now we're at University of Hawaii here, rocking and rolling. What's next?
So the idea was that maybe with a master's degree, I would be able to get a job teaching Japanese. That was, you know, if given the chance to teach English or Japanese, I just enjoy Japanese more because it's something that by trying to teach it, I end up learning more about it. And that's just kind of, I love doing that. But what ended up happening is, I wasn't really finding anything here, and I didn't want to leave Hawaii, but as I said, it's a lot more competitive here because there are so many more native speakers. And so I started thinking about my options. One thing that I started doing was maybe I should go into speech pathology. That's what I thought. You know, it has the linguistic background. I get to help people. It's a much more stable job than, you know, like language teacher. So I start taking prereqs for that. And I end up doing the interview for that. I didn't get it. I don't know why. They don't really tell you. I thought the interview went well. I was doing well in all the prereqs. But a few months before I do the interview and all that stuff, I start japankyo.com. I'm writing articles. I'm translating like Japanese news into English. And then from a friend that is still at the University of Hawaii, she was a PhD candidate. She hears about someone that is trying to start an English language magazine related to Japan. And so she tells me about that. And I think, all right, I'll give it a shot. You know, I hadn't considered being a magazine writer or an editor, but the topic seems interesting, so I'll give it a shot. And the interview for that went really well. The owner just really enjoyed talking to me. He enjoyed the website that I was doing. He liked the silly stories that I was writing. I guess he liked my background, and he hired me. And I've been doing that for about 3 years now. You know, things are crazy right now with Corona and all that, but I'm still there. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful job that's given me so many opportunities to meet all kinds of people, like Kei Nishikori. Like I got to interview him, you know, like it's just
cool.
All kinds of like unexpected things that when I was even like in JET or before then, I never would have imagined that like this is like one place I would end up, right? So
yeah. Like you kind of here's the thing. Like you unlock this. You know, a big problem people have is after JET is what do I do, right? Does my JET experience matter? How do I still work in Japan? Like work in Japan, kind of, even though you're back in your home country, and you kind of made it happen. Mm-hmm. So let's see, how can we help people recreate your success? Though is the problem, right? So is it networking, as I hear so many times on the show, or does it just keep your options open? What kind of advice do you give people to kind of find their next thing after they get back to their home country?
Well, I mean, trying to look at my own experiences just objectively, I think it's that it's those things, all those things that you mentioned, right? Networking. Yeah. So I was nice to this person. This person is a good friend of mine. I met a lot of wonderful people in graduate school. I always try to be a nice person, not a bad a-hole or, whatever, even if I don't like the person, I'm just cordial. So you never know, right? You never know what can come from those kinds of connections. But two, also like, yes, I was writing very silly stories. Like Japankyo.com at the beginning was just me trying to find like the silliest, oddest Japanese news stories that hadn't been translated into English yet. And I found many, and they got cited by, like The Sun and Sora News and a whole bunch of other places. But like, even though the content was silly, it was still something that I could put on my resume. Like I was translating these stories, my ability to find stories that would to some extent go viral. But, like all this stuff is stuff that ended up paying off when I found this job. Right. Yeah. So even though like, I don't think I had the most clear career path because I was just kind of, I want to study Japanese, so I'm going to study Japanese. Like that was kind of my mentality. It all, thankfully, and I'm extremely thankful for everything that has happened, but it all ended up kind of clicking together. So my advice really is, keep trying stuff. Like even if you may not think that it's going to lead to something, if you can somehow spin it to sell yourself later on, then that's an asset, right? It may be an asset that you won't expect will serve you at some point later on, right?
Yeah. Like if there's anything you could do, like put yourself out there, create something. Yeah. Even if you're not like, you're going to get 10 million listeners on a podcast. If you just have a podcast to even show what kind of person you're about, you're kind of talking to people skills, that kind of stuff. And a podcast, as you probably know, is the best way to meet people on the planet. I mean, I'm not saying there's many ways to meet people, and you did a blog first, I know, but yeah. There's no better excuse to saying, "Hey, can I talk to you?" than having a podcast, right?
Absolutely.
Like you can't do that without a podcast. You can't talk to people and just say, "Hey, can I talk to you for half an hour?" It doesn't work like that. That's not that's not the world we're in. But
absolutely,
there's many ways to get yourself out there and find that's a good way to network when it's not you can't go through the normal channels of like job fair, job conference, that kind of stuff. So that's really cool. And I'm going to make sure we say like you did start Japankyo.com with kind of. What was your thinking there? Was this part of the master plan, or was it just, hey, I want to do something fun for myself?
Not at all. It was just I had some extra time because I was doing the prereqs for the speech pathology, which gave me more time than graduate school. And graduate school I had very, very little extra time. So I wanted to do something to just keep my Japanese polished, to keep translating. And because I saw that there was a gap, I was seeing stories that were not getting translated. And so I just thought, I'll give this a shot. I have no idea, like, will this turn into something? No idea, but I just gave it a shot. And thankfully it's been, that led to the podcast, and I've loved doing the podcast, and now I'm here talking to you. So, hey.
There you go. Yeah. So yeah. And also another thing about putting your translations out there, that is a great thing to link for your resume and stuff. Like I've done this, even if it's something stupid, like you did news stories, but you could do anything out there and say, hey, this is an example of my translation. And there you go.
Absolutely.
And I know personally from translation people, they don't actually always read what you write. So even if you translate something 10 years ago and it sucks now, still put it on there because it's something you did translate, even though obviously it's best to have it up to date and make sure all your best stuff is on there. But if you're just starting out, sometimes you don't have that much to put on a resume. So anything counts, even if you translate some, love novel you found at the 100 yen store or something, So
yeah, it's all little by little. It all adds up.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. So that's cool. Yeah. So but let's talk about your podcast a little bit. What kind of is your overall theme there? What are you trying to convey there on your Japan Station podcast?
So Japan Station, it's a pun, right, on radio station and train station, and so I throw in some train station noises there. But it's an interview podcast, and thankfully, like doing a podcast is something that was like somewhere in the back of my head for a long time, but it really wasn't something that I decided to do until I was already at Wasabi Magazine doing the editor job. Because as part of my job, I was interviewing people just constantly, right? All kinds of people, from, well-known people to just your local business owners, in Japanese, in English, just all kinds of people. And so I thought, you know what, like I'm already interviewing people. I have this website, so maybe a good way to kind of keep growing this and also just have fun is to do my own podcast. And so I've gotten to talk to all kinds of people, and a couple of the interviews that I've done for Wasabi I was also able to use for Japan Station. Like I talked to the singer Crystal K, like the creator of Usagi Yojimbo, Stan Sakai. Those were all for articles in Wasabi, but I was able to use the audio for Japan Station. So yeah, I release 2 episodes a month, usually on the 1st and the 15th. And you can find all that stuff at japanstationpodcast.com. I also do another podcast, Ichimon Japan. On that one, it's me and my friend from graduate school. We ask like silly questions like, do Japanese people have longer intestines than Westerners? And I do a lot of research to like give you the answers to those kinds of questions.
Very important question.
Yes.
We've all wanted to know that one, I think,
Yes.
at some point in our life. So I'm not going to spoil it here, by the way. Just go listen to the show and hear it out. But yeah, you can find Tony's stuff, japankyo.com, spelled like today, like, you know, as
Today,
it would be spelled in English, KYO.com.
Yeah.
So go check that out. So yeah, Tony, well, I guess to kind of sum it up, though, I guess, of course, you might hear me on his podcast as well. There might be a link right now in the show notes page, ALTinsider.com, but you'll find out later. But Tony, so what kind of advice do you give people that are just going out? I like to end with this question these days, is about to start their Japan journey. What kind of advice would you give them to kind of make sure they get the most out of it, no matter what they want to do?
Well, what I would say is always try to be doing something. And what I mean by that is odds are that you will have a lot of extra time. So what I was doing a lot of the time was studying Japanese, and my Japanese was already at a pretty good level, but I just kept going and kept going and kept going. And so I'm totally certain that helped me. But even if it's not studying Japanese, maybe you can study, something else. And even if that doesn't end up being the course you're taking, it's better than, not doing anything and just sitting at your desk, right? So, try to take those extra opportunities you can to do something that maybe might be productive in the future, right? That maybe you can put on your resume, that maybe will help you out in some unexpected way.
Yeah, that's a good point for sure. And now, now that I've been in Japan 10 years, my time is coming to an end. My biggest regret, I'll tell you right now, is that I didn't use those first couple of years to do anything except enjoy Japan, right? And I know it's not bad,
and that's good.
You should
that's
take
important.
some time. Yeah,
that's important.
You should take some time to do that. But you could probably do it in a year, not 4 or 5. Start studying Japanese as soon as you can, because you'll thank yourself later. Start, networking outside of just the people that go drinking with you, stuff to think about that. But yeah, Tony, awesome stuff. I'm sure we'll talk again in the future, but yeah, keep it rocking and rolling, and good luck to you in the future.
Thanks, James. Again, all the relevant links will be in the show notes, as always, at japanstationpodcast.com or in your podcast app of choice, Inside Japan Podcast, altinsider.com. I highly recommend the podcast. There's tons of really useful information there if you're thinking about working in Japan, or if you're just curious about other people that have worked in Japan. Just so many guests there. I think James has like over 250 episodes. Like, he's coming close to 300 episodes if you include the other show, like when it was still called ALT Insider. Then, like I said, he rebranded it Inside Japan. But if you count all of them, I think he's coming close to 300 episodes. So yeah, James has been at this for a very long time. And like I said in the interview, I just really, really respect his commitment and consistency to always, put out good stuff and on a regular schedule. So just really amazing stuff. And again, thank you so much, James, for making time despite it being so crazy. I can only imagine how much insanity must be going on in your life now that you're preparing to go back to the US after 10 years or more, and you have children and wife and just, the whole family and belongings, and it must be crazy. I do not envy you, but thank you for making time. As for some of the stuff I discussed in the interview, I think, quite a few things there I hadn't discussed before, and there's more that I could discuss about some of those things, but I'm sure they'll come up in future episodes, maybe even a solo episode at some point. But if you have any questions or comments about anything I discussed, or if you just want to say hello or get the word out about some Japan-related project that you're working on, send me an email to mail@japanstationpodcast.com. You can also follow on Facebook and Twitter @JapanKyo News. And of course, remember to subscribe, rate, review. That is always really appreciated. And if you want to go the extra mile and really support the show, then go to japankyo.com/Patreon and sign up. You can sign up for as little as $1 a month. For $3 a month, you get access to my newest podcast, Japanese Plus Alpha. That one is focused on the Japanese language. It's kind of quirks and interesting etymologies and just, various kind of linguistic-y sort of things. So I have 4 episodes up now, and later this month, episode 5 will be going up. So, $3 a month gets you access to that. Consider it if you can afford that. And thank you so much to Yunomi, of course, for providing the theme song. And that does it for this episode. Episode 47 is done. Episode 48 is coming on September 15th. And that is the one that was supposed to be episode 47, but now it's episode 48 because this one is episode 47. So come back for that on September 15th. Thank you so much for listening to this very special, unexpected, super surprise episode of Japan Station. And remember, go find your miniature pony.
Just do it!